Hello, and welcome to our webinar, Effectively Managing High Volume Workstreams for In-House Lawyers. My name is Alexandra Perry, and I'm the Deputy Head of Legal at LegalVision, and I'm joined by my colleague Georgina Toomey, who's the Head of Legal and General Manager for LegalVision New Zealand.
Hi, everyone.
Before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. So you'll receive the recording and copies of the slides afterwards in your email. Please feel free to submit questions in the Q&A box and we will endeavour to answer all of them at the end. And we'd be really grateful if you could please complete the feedback survey after the webinar as well. We are Australia's leading tech-driven legal services business law firm. We are actually a full service commercial law firm with over 150 lawyers across Australia, New Zealand and the UK. And I think what sets us apart is that we are supported by custom-built tech, which enabled us to provide cost-effective legal solutions. So we're really driven by process, technology, and use those processes and technology to provide cost-effective quality legal services to a range of businesses. We work with not only SMEs across Australia, New Zealand and the UK, but we also work with our in-house legal team, so larger enterprise clients as well. And because we talk to a number of in-house counsel all the time, we're aware of the challenges that they're facing. And when we talk to these in-house counsel, the same themes start coming up in terms of what the challenges are and what they're grappling with as in-house lawyers. And here's a few things that in-house lawyers that we work with have said to us. So they're dealing with budgetary constraints and constant pressures to do more with less. They're working in a silo and expected to be an expert across multiple practice areas, and that's particularly when you're a sole in-house counsel and you don't have a team around you. There's a struggle to focus on the really high impact strategic work because there's such an overflow of high volume business as usual legal work. They're struggling to keep across evolving technology and changing regulatory landscapes. And there's also a challenge to attract and retain really good talent in quite a competitive legal market. So all this to say, the feedback, based on the feedback and the trends and the data that we see, there are three key challenges that in-house legal teams seem to be facing at the moment. There's this continued expansion of the role of the in-house counsel, the requirement to become more multifaceted, more dynamic and strategic and provide quality advice to internal stakeholders. There's an expectation that workloads will continue to increase without necessarily budgets increasing. And I think that's particularly so, given the macroeconomic climate at the moment, we're not necessarily going to be seeing increased budgets. And there's also an expectation that in-house teams will utilize technology to increase operational efficiency and productivity. And when you put the costs or decreasing costs alongside the increasing expectations around speed and quality, it starts to become or feel like this impossible target for the in-house lawyers that we speak to. And I guess that brings us on to our goal for today.
Yeah, so look, today we're basically going to focus primarily on that BAU sort of scope of work. So basically managing those high volume work streams. So how might you be able to deliver them more efficiently, more cost effectively, while also keeping in mind, obviously, doing it in a legally prudent manner as well to make sure that you're appropriately managing the risk associated with the business and the type of work that your team is being asked to do. So we're not going to be focusing here on, or nor does it necessarily require us to implement any sort of sophisticated technology solutions. We understand that obviously, depending on the size of your team, the size of your business, that's not always practical. financially, might not be in line with your budget constraints, and they're also not necessarily an immediate solution that you can deploy tomorrow. So what we're going to be looking at is some really simple, practical, tested strategies that you can implement to help manage those high volume work streams, do it in an efficient, cost-effective way, appropriately managing that legal risk, and importantly, they're tools that you can, start to look implementing tomorrow. Now, as we sort of go through this, Ellie and I will probably use the term legal transformation a bit here. It's not as technical or inaccessible or pretentious as it sounds, but look, it's really just a reference to looking at any of your pre-existing work streams, the way that you're delivering work, and working out how you or the team can start to deliver that in a smarter, more efficient way. And importantly, often what we're looking at here is how can we also improve the consistency and quality of that output as well. So part one's really about having all the, the foundations and information in place to be able to identify those high volume BAU work streams that should be the target for those legal transformation projects. And then Ali's going to talk to, in part two, basically some of the tools that you can start to use to transform those targeted areas for improvement as well. So in terms of the first step that we're going to talk to here today, this is really, before you implement any of these legal transformation projects, it's becoming really, really clear on what your team is spending their time on. So to do that, you're obviously going to need some really good quality data, so comprehensive, relevant data. So what it really means is right from the outset, you and your team need to become really disciplined around data collection. You need to identify what types of data you need. You need to collect it over a period of time, and then use that to make some really informed decisions. Now, there's obviously plenty of platforms out there that you can use to offer this service, but just as equally, an Excel spreadsheet is often simple and just as effective of a tool to use to start to collate this information. So in terms of the types of data that you want to be looking at collecting, this is obviously going to vary, but at a minimum, it should be including looking at, okay, so what's the type of work that you're doing? So categorize, label that work stream, understand the type of legal inquiries that you're looking to respond to. How much input or time are you spending on each piece of work? How much, so what's the volume of this sort of type of request, and where, so where are those requests coming from? Which department within your business are they coming from? And with that data, what you're basically getting a good idea of is what's the cost to service that legal work. If possible, you might also want to be looking at things like the legal and commercial risk and complexity of that work, and then also obviously the strategic value and importance of that work to the business. Now, this is really, well, sorry, go back to step one, Ellie. I've really slowed down where we're going, but I think this one's really important in the sense of with that collection of the data, you need to be making sure that you're collecting it over an extended period of time, because you want to make a really informed decision. So at LV, we're looking at collecting it over at least 2 or 3 weeks before we're looking to launch any kind of change project. And the other piece as well is you're wanting to display that data in a way that helps you extract those really meaningful insights. So, lawyers, well, I certainly don't have any kind of natural inclination towards Excel spreadsheets or formulas. So, we just really encourage you to lean on the people within your broader business who can help you with that. So we will typically work really closely with our finance team. They will help collate the data, display it, and then help extract information and trends from it. So then, once you've got that data, you're in that position to really start to assess it, distill it to inform, that transformation focus. And you should be considering, what are the trends in it? What are the obvious pain points? What are the work streams that basically your team are taking too much time on? So that brings us to this next step where we're mapping those work streams. So once you've identified those trends in terms of the type and volume of work coming into your team, you're then going to be able to hopefully quite easily identify some targets for easy transformation projects. Now, a key tool that we recommend using here is this concept of a workflow mapping process, which is shown on the screen now. So the quadrants that you're using, they can obviously be changed according to what the preferences are for you. It will likely depend on your business, the particular legal function that you're operating. But for the purposes of this example and how we, what we usually use at LegalVision, the key determinants that we're using are usually input and opportunity. So when we speak to input, we're really looking at the level of complexity of the work, or the specialisation that's involved. We're looking at the number of lawyer hours that are going into delivering that work. Basically, all of the resources that are required to complete the tasks. So ultimately for us, this is the cost to service the work. Now, the other thing that we're looking at is the opportunity piece, which is a much more subjective analysis. So there we're looking at, we might be saying, can that work be delivered more efficiently? Can we deliver a better experience for our client in doing that work? Now, the work streams that are most ripe for transformation are those work streams where the input is low and the opportunity in terms of repeatability, the opportunity to deliver more with less is high. Now, again, how you define those quadrants will really hinge on your particular circumstances, what you're looking to try and achieve and what you need. Some other examples that we see being used for this sort of exercise might be legal complexity versus repeatability. It might be risk versus repeatability. But the most important piece is to have that subjective analysis as one of those determinants. So can it be done better? So the next step then is to really start to question, where are you focusing your time and energy? And are you focusing on the most impactful work? So as Ali flagged right at the start, one major problem that you're all intimately familiar with is in-house counsels are trying to do too much with too little. So ultimately, this becomes a task of triaging the work and determining who's best placed to do that work. Now, the idea here is it's highly likely that not all the work that is coming into your legal function or sits within the legal function in your business is work that you should be keeping within your team. So what we typically sort of encourage our in-house lawyers to be thinking about is, the only work that you should be holding on to that is work that absolutely must be done by the in-house legal function. So generally speaking, that's going to be the work that's business critical. It's probably going to be strategic, there's high value add. It might require that deep institutional knowledge that only you have. And ultimately, it's work that's going to be too hard to try and refer out or too slow to refer out. So ultimately, it's coming back to that question of, well, what needs to be done by our team? Now, second question there is, well, what can I actually refer out? Now, this is work, if it doesn't have to be done by you, do you have an external strategic legal partner that you can use to refer that work out that you've got a good relationship with? I won't talk in too much detail there because we will come back to it later. But effectively, really what we're doing there is basically you're making some strategic decisions in the sense of, do they have a particular set of specialist expertise, or do they have maybe more breadth of lawyers that can do high volume, larger tasks that you might not be able to service in-house? Then finally, what we're going to be looking at is basically what work can potentially be done or self-serviced by your business stakeholders. So there you're looking at the data and where it came from. Can some of those departments self-service that legal work? So generally speaking, that will be the work in the fourth quadrant that we were talking about earlier. So high input, low input and low complexity, but high repeatability. So most opportunity for transformation. So that's the kind of work that potentially could be serviced by a particular department within the business, depending on the risk profile of it. But obviously, in order to do that, you need to be educating the broader business. You need to be providing them with the tools to deliver that work, and ultimately lay those foundations to make sure that the legal risk is managed if you are outsourcing it or insourcing it within your business. So showing on the screen now, basically, you can use that risk matrix then to obviously triage those various work streams. And what's showing on your screen is an example of a client of ours who underwent this assessment. And it shows the matrix in play. So they obviously looked at the data, they identified their trends, they collated feedback, and then they mapped out the work that they were doing onto the various quadrants. They then were obviously asking the question of, well, what work needs to be done by us, and thought about what work can be referred out or self-serviced within other departments, and then identified their targets. So unsurprisingly, you can see the targets are in quadrants 3 and 4. So highest opportunity for transformation. So it was also the work that there's quick wins there. So less complex work, it's high volume, things like standard contract reviews, standard contract negotiations. It might be handling customer complaints, things like that, things that the business potentially could be self-servicing themselves. So it's effectively just a bit of a snapshot of what that could look like for you undergoing this evaluation process. So I'll now hand over to Ali to talk about some of the practical tools that you can use.
Thanks, George. You might regret giving me control of the slides this time.
Never.
Like normally George controls the slides. Yeah, so as George said, in this part, we're going to look at some tips and tricks and tools for how you transform some of those quadrant 4 pieces of work, so that the empower or the refer out types of work, that high opportunity, high repeatability, but maybe low risk and low input type tools. Legal transformation, it's it can sound scarier or more tech than it really is, but it is just really the process of fundamentally changing how legal services are delivered or managed within an organization. And it can look like anything from, process optimization to upskilling legal professionals or upskilling internal stakeholders to be able to self-serve and project manage more effectively. It may be redesigning workflows and operational models to increase productivity and reducing costs, or it could include technological integration where you're adopting and leveraging new technologies to streamline processes and find opportunities for efficiencies. But at the end of the day, the goal is really to make legal departments in-house or law firms more efficient, effective, and aligned with broader business goals. Before we get into the tools, I just thought it would be useful to go through a bit of a case study that we actually did with one of our clients. And it is the same client that George was referring to before, where we mapped out the process, the data collection process and where the opportunities were. So this client is a leading multinational supplier of consumer goods and medical devices. They're overseen by a larger global in-house team that have strict global contracting requirements and risk requirements. But then you also have obviously the nuances of the regulatory landscape in New Zealand. And this client also worked in Australia as well. So we were assisting them from an Australian and a New Zealand perspective. The client's small in-house team in New Zealand really struggled with the high volume of business as usual work, as well as inefficient processes that were flowing down from global, and difficulties in hiring or finding good talent to expand the team. The main pain points were really in relation to customer contract generation. So they had a lot of precedents that were used, but not necessarily streamlined. Third-party contract reviews where they were having, always having to negotiate certain clauses, and third-party contracts were always coming to the legal team to be reviewed. and then ad hoc regulatory inquiries from business units. Specifically in this space, things like privacy and medical regulations were a big pain point. We went through the data collection process that George has spoken to, where we gathered data on their current work streams and we triaged those work streams. We looked at the effort that was put into each type of work, the input required from the team, and also where the work was coming from in terms of business units. So they had several different business units that were sending through work at the same time, and we helped categorize into that matrix that we provided earlier. Over a 6-month period, we worked with them to deploy a number of low-tech transformation tools. And these are the low-tech transformation tools that we'll be speaking to a little bit further shortly. And we've worked with this client for now 5 years, again, helping them in New Zealand and Australia. And we've got a great relationship with them, which has been really, I guess, cemented through this process of the transformation project that we assisted with them quite early on. So the transformation tools that we used, we looked at their precedents, helped develop further precedents and optimize their existing ones, knowledge banks, cheat sheets and checklists, workstream playbooking, escalation and workflow optimization, and of course, strategic partnerships. None of these are probably new tools to you, but hopefully the way in which we sort of looked at them and helped to integrate them with the team can provide some useful tools for you going forward. So in terms of precedents, it surprises me still the number of in-house counsel that I speak to that don't, the teams don't necessarily have precedents. As I've spoken to in-house more, I've realized that part of the problem is there are not enough hours in the day. You're often fighting fires and sort of doing a lot of reactive work, which doesn't allow for much time to get the proactive work done. But it is important to find the time to invest in developing precedents, particularly your most used documents, if you have standard form contracts that your business uses. But it's more than just providing or drafting precedents. They need to be useful. So they need to be refined in a way that reduces drafting and reduces negotiation. What we did with our case study client was that we reviewed their existing precedent base, including their most negotiated clauses, and we updated the precedents for consistency across the board and really to reduce signing friction, which meant that we looked at the most negotiated clauses. We tried to find a happy medium, a place where our client was well protected, but it wasn't going to always be negotiated every time they tried to engage the customer. And then we put in place a system, including education, to ensure that the precedents were used correctly by internal stakeholders. And where possible, things were not escalated to the legal team if it didn't need to be. With this client, we also assisted them with implementing an automation. So they now have a number of their precedents automated for them, the business to use. The next tool is a playbook. And what a playbook is, what I mean by that, it's essentially just a guide that outlines standardized strategies, clauses, and responses during contract negotiations. And it's obviously a legally approved guide, approved by the in-house legal team or lawyer, and it can be used as a tool to empower your internal stakeholders, your internal team members to self-serve. It's not only useful for your non-legal team members, but it's also useful for your lawyers as you're growing your team, so that when you get new lawyers join the business, or if you have secondees, or if you're working with an external partner, they know what your standard positions are on certain issues. They know what your risk appetite is and what your fallback positions are. So with our case study client, we developed a series of commercial contracting negotiation playbooks. And the fundamental goal was to really help the internal stakeholders self-serve and to ensure consistency when engaging external legal counsel and growing the team. We reviewed their standard form contracts to identify what the most negotiated clauses were, and then helped them set out the base position, which you can see here, as well as a first compromise position and then a final position. And it also, in this playbook, we also provided guidance notes to the internal stakeholders, just so that they could, again, really understand what it was that they were negotiating, and they could do a first round of negotiation before it needed to be escalated to the internal legal team. So knowledge banks, that's another tool we used. These are really, it's an umbrella term that we use for legally approved template advices or clause banks or other communications that your legal or non-legal team might use. It's a way of capturing your knowledge. As George said, you can often have a lot of knowledge in your internal legal team, whether it's through one person or across the team. And if you were to, lose members of the team or, have changes in the way that the team is structured, you can often lose a lot of that knowledge, that really important knowledge that you need to use to service your internal stakeholders. So it's a way of capturing that knowledge, and it's a way of empowering internal stakeholders, again, improving efficiencies and minimizing risk in terms of advice. When you're doing the data collection analysis that George spoke to earlier, it's important to be capturing this type of information. So any knowledge, any types of advice, to be capturing that, categorizing it, tagging it, and making it part of your delivery process. So when you get a new request from your internal stakeholders, and it's on a certain piece of advice, whether it's privacy, whether it's consumer law, you have a library of advice that you can refer back to and use as a base at least, or a jumping point. It's then important to continue to monitor for quality and obviously changes and regulatory updates, and educate and empower your internal stakeholders to be able to use the knowledge banks and cheat sheets. For our clients in the case study, we developed a series of knowledge banks, cheat sheets to help them self-serve. For example, given the complex regulatory environment, we developed a marketing checklist that their marketing team could use, so that before any marketing collateral came to the in-house legal team for sign-off, it had gone through the checklist process with the marketing team, and they could, be confident when they were sending things through to the legal team that the key pain points had been addressed. So cheat sheets are very similar to knowledge banks in that they're a way of capturing existing knowledge within the team. Essentially, the guidance notes on particular legal issues or types of contract. Again, they're useful for educating, upskilling both legal and non-legal team members. And they can be used as a first point of call, again, for internal stakeholders. So marketing checklists, NDA or confidentiality agreement review, cheat sheets, or, a checklist of things to look out for when you're dealing with warranty claims. This is an example of a cheat sheet. It's just a very simple NDA cheat sheet that one of our clients provided to their internal stakeholders because they had a really high volume of NDAs that they were constantly reviewing, and the team felt that they could be better utilized or spend their time on more impactful work rather than reviewing numerous NDAs. As we've said, as an in-house lawyer, you want to be spending time on the work that is most impactful and the strategic work streams. So in order to do that and to benefit from all the transformation tools that we've spoken to, you actually need to have in place a bit of an escalation process. They're really just a good part of risk management as well. So this is a snapshot of the escalation process we prepared for our client. It ensures that the right work was triaged through the legal team, which then helped to address issues of productivity and proactivity, rather than having the legal team always working in a really reactive manner. So things we would look for as part of the escalation process for commercial contract reviews would be, is it a standard form contract? Is it our precedent that's being used? Is the total contract value below a certain amount? And if so, for this particular client, they were happy for the internal team to go through the process of approving, and then all it required was sign off from whoever was required to sign the contract. If the contract is not business critical, again, perhaps there's an ability for the team to self-service. And what is meant by business critical was obviously defined for this client, and needs to be defined in accordance with what your key priorities are, what your key risk appetite is as well. And then, is there a knowledge resource? Is there a playbook that can help the business to self-serve? If there's not to any of those questions, they decided that the legal team themselves would keep that work, that would keep that contract review, or refer out to a third-party provider. And if the answer to all of those questions is yes, then they allowed for self-service alongside proper sign-off processes. And that brings us to our last transformation tool, which I think, George, you'll speak to this.
I can speak to that. So we've obviously spoken a lot around the first bucket, which is the work that you're going to keep sort of business critical within your in-house legal team, and then the last bucket of work, which is where you're equipping your departments, various departments within the business to self-service. So this is that middle bucket that we're keen to talk to you about now, which is the strategic partnerships. So we're clearly speaking here to external legal providers. And by strategic, what we're really talking about here is making sure that you've got a really good, diverse set of partners that you're working with here. So it could be that you're working with one or more external legal firms, and the people that you're looking to engage to most effectively deliver those work streams that you're not wanting to resource in-house. So what you're looking to do is obviously have your team only focus on that most impactful work. And then through that earlier analysis that we spoke to about, you've already identified those work streams that could be more effectively delivered by one of those strategic partners. Now, when you're selecting who that could be, you could be leveraging a certain set of specialist expertise. So it could be this fantastic law firm that you've worked with in the past that's got specialist financial reg expertise, or they might have a cross-border tax function that you might know that you're going to need regularly, or it might be it's one of the top tier firms. They've got a large team of juniors, and they've got the capacity and the ability to run a large scale maybe DD process or discovery process for you. Separately, it could be just that you don't have the legal spend to invest in technology, or you don't have the time to put in place these systems and processes. So you might be looking to an external provider who have got those systems and processes and tech in place to handle those work streams that you can't handle internally quite as effectively. So, for example, law firms will come to LegalVision because they know that we can handle those high volume BAU pieces of work like customer supplier contracts, NDAs, and the reason that we can do that in a way that they're not equipped to is because all of our lawyers are using, the systems, the processes, the tech, they're using automation, they're using AI, all of the things that we've developed internally over time to meet those needs, both for the in-house legal teams that we work with, but also for our own clients as well. So what we're really talking about here is leveraging the resource of your external partners in the most strategic way possible. So the things that you should be considering here are, again, make sure you've got diversity amongst those partners. Make sure that they've got the right tools for the right job. So obviously you're not going to be referring out a whole bunch of NDAs to your top tier law firm because they're going to charge you hourly rates. What you're instead wanting to do is look for an external partner who can manage that volume for you in a really cost-effective way. we also really encourage our legal teams, you know, obviously a lot of people that we talk to won't want to work with us. A lot of them do want to work with us. The really critical thing when you're on the side of the in-house counsel is finding a firm or firms that align with your values. So do they understand your business? Do they understand the way that you want to work? Are they familiar with your legal and commercial risk profile? And the other really key piece is, are they prepared to tailor their solution to suit you and what you specifically need? And part of that alignment is to find a billing model that works for you. And I think, look, I think we're all very clear on this now, and it's largely been driven by client demand across the board over the last few years. But none of us should be settling for or accepting hourly rates as the norm for this kind of external function. We need to sort of more regularly be thinking about those alternative billing models. So, you know, fixed fee arrangements, a retainer and subscription arrangements. You might want to look at capping any hourly rates that are going to apply, or it might just be a combination of all of those things. Now, and the other piece as well to consider is obviously there's huge value in terms of using a panel of external legal providers. So again, you're looking at that consistency and familiarity of teams that you're used to working with that understand your business and your legal function, but you've got the breadth of expertise that you need for the differing sort of matters that are coming across your desk. Now,
just on that, George, sorry, I was just going to say we are seeing a lot of in-house teams who are looking to diversify their panel. So, you know, as George said, still working with the firms that they know and they trust and they have a good relationship with, but also in exploring, you know, alternative legal service providers or alternative billing methods for their panel, so that they're again using the right tool for the right job.
And sometimes we're seeing this more and more as the budget gets reduced for those in-house legal teams. You get one lawyer often who's expected to be able to cover a huge breadth of legal areas. Now, for a certain obviously risk level and profile, that's appropriate, but that's where that diversification becomes really important, because actually, you know, you need to be able to find those specialist providers in those specialist areas, but also not being charged those top law firm prices as well. So really critical to get that balance right and keep testing it as well. So whoever you set up as your legal panel today might look quite different in a year's time or even 6 months' time. So keep reassessing it and keep testing those providers as well to ensure that you're getting from them what you need. Now, obviously, you know, with this very captive audience, it would be remiss of us not to talk about what LegalVision can offer in this regard. So look, I'll hand back over to Ali, who can talk about our particular desk extension solution.
Thanks, George. Yeah, as I said at the start, we do support dozens of businesses across Australia and New Zealand and the in-house legal teams. We do this under what is called what we call a desk extension solution, and that is where we essentially aim to function as a seamless extension of your in-house legal team. Now, the client that we spoke to earlier, that this is the solution that we provide to them, and under that solution, we provide this transformation sort of process, these transformation tools. All of our clients that we work with on a desk extension, we assist them to create playbooks, create knowledge banks, optimize their precedents, and assist with escalation processes and pathways. So that is part of the service, but it's also a service that's really great for supporting a high volume of business as usual legal requests that come through, and it allows teams to focus on that impactful work. Because our breadth, bench depth and breadth, we're able to find the right tool for the right job, which means no bottlenecks. And it can often be an effective alternative, a cost-effective alternative to hiring an additional full-time equivalent or having a secondee. And the reason for that is, yeah, we can assist with multiple matters at once, given the breadth and bench depth of the team. We price based on complexity, type, and volume of the legal needs, and we don't provide any, no lock-in contracts or anything like that. We're very happy to work on month-to-month arrangements. So yeah, that's it. If you've got any questions, obviously feel free to let us know, or there will be an opportunity for you to book a free consult at the end if you're interested.
A very gentle sales pitch. So look, thanks for that, Ali. And obviously, so on your screen now, and this is available to anyone who views this after, obviously not viewing it live, but we do have a general counsel toolkit that we've prepared for our directed our New Zealand in-house legal teams and general counsel. So do feel free to download that. It covers a lot of what Ali and I have spoken about today in terms of those workflows and the mapping and data collection. So we do encourage you to download that if you think that would be of use. The next thing we've got, obviously, is we are regularly running webinars. And look, we're starting to increase the volume of our in-house counsel webinars for New Zealand because we've identified that there's a real need for that. So do keep an eye out into 2025 as we run these specific in-house counsel webinars much more regularly. But in the meantime, we've got one more scheduled for this year, just a more general webinar. But look, will be probably of a lot of use to those in-house counsel that are attending today. So that's on employment essentials for tech businesses on the 5th of December at midday. So do join us for that. And then finally, or almost finally, we've got a Q&A session. Now, I don't think we've got any Q&A that's come in that we haven't already addressed. So maybe, Ali, is there anything else that you wanted to comment on as a final comment here?
No, I think yeah, we've covered mostly the questions that we've had. So yeah, if there's no other questions, we'll wrap up.
Perfect. So look, obviously, Ali touched on it. We're really keen to have a chat with any of you out there that are looking to discuss that desk extension offering that we do have. It's tailored to in-house counsel, so we would love to talk a little bit more about it with you and how it might help you out. Obviously, if you do have any questions that crop up as well that you haven't managed to ask today, you can use that as an opportunity to ask those questions as well. So look, thank you all for coming along today. Thanks, Ali, for co-presenting with me. And I hope you all have a lovely rest of your Tuesday.
See everyone.